Well, we should probably mention that we have 210 crew members in the 100% Wild Facebook crew on Facebook.
We could basically rent a bar out and just have a great night.
We can start a militia.
Well, okay.
I mean, if you got some spare time and want something to do. I don't know if they have captains.
I'm the captain.
Adjutants, maybe?
Yeah.
I want some ridiculous title.
All right.
Colonel Drury.
All right. This segment of DoD TV is brought to you by Leupold, American to the core.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Drury Outdoors 100% Wild Podcast, episode 229. We are your very newest favorite Murder, She Wrote rewatch podcast.
Is that what the letters ended up standing for? The knife op?
Knife op, not your favorite podcast.
Yeah, that's right.
Not your favorite outdoors podcast.
That's right. We got to be specific.
We're going to try our darndest.
So we're back in studio today in the DeerCast studio.
Yeah, you are off the road, and you are Matt Drury, I should.
And you are
folks
Tim Shelswick,
know.
Of course.
We got a great guest on today. We'll get to Jim Ronquest in a little bit, so we're going to talk ducks and bucks, which is a little change of a pace for us.
I only know a little bit about one of those topics.
And nothing about the other.
That's right. Absolutely zero. So I'm looking forward to it.
Same here. So we should catch folks up on your little trip to Kansas.
Yeah. So as we did the last podcast, I was in Kansas in the mobile command unit there.
AKA the trailer.
The trailer. And I believe when we filmed that, was that Thursday we filmed it?
It was.
So the day before we talked about, I had set up a ground blind with Scott and our landowner in a fence row that we had kept seeing this 8-point, a couple bucks walking down. It was about 400 or 500 yards from where we had been set up. And so Wednesday night, or Wednesday afternoon, I should say, we hunted there and didn't have any luck. So Thursday, after we filmed the podcast, we went out and, our 8-pointer, he shows up, and it was interesting because DeerCast was saying that it was just going to be okay, which Mark and Terry talk about it all the time. That's still okay to go hunt.
And the deer are still out there.
Yeah, they're still out there. You still get a decent shot, but what was kind of going against us was the temperatures were starting to get a little warmer, and it was just, ideal conditions weren't as ideal because the full moon was on the 20th. So the moon was starting to set later and later in the mornings, and, it just wasn't as ideal as it had been. So anyways, we go in fairly early because we had nothing else to do. So we were sitting in there and it's warm, man. It's warm. And we're sitting there and I'm like, I don't know about tonight, but I pull up DeerCast and all of a sudden, and this is the beauty of it, because it's that hourly forecast, it's constantly being updated. It changed from an okay all afternoon to a good for the last 3 hours. And not that that's, the end all be all, but
the deer aren't looking at it and be like, oh, I should get up.
I got to move.
Time to go.
DeerCast says good. But I looked at Scott and I'm like, hey, this actually changed. Like it changed my disposition about the hunt a little bit.
It's funny. Yeah.
It's funny how that works, the mental side of hunting. And I know all you awesome hunters out there that don't need an app to go hunt. I'm not saying that, but it was pretty interesting. It changed. And not long after that, the deer did start getting up and start moving.
Yeah.
And our 8-pointer, he shows up at the end of the field that he had been showing up on. But instead of walking down the fence row like he had done every time we'd seen him, he walked clear across the field to the other blind. Like
how
100
close
yards,
was he to the other
100
blind?
Yards. He was definitely within, we're using that Traditions nitrifier. He was within range. Yeah. I was like, son of a, as Scott said, I was dog cussing in that blind because I'm just looking at him in the binoculars and like, he's going right to the other
playing
blind.
Whack-a-mole.
And we didn't sit there because the wind, even though they're scent proof, I'm still playing the wind to a degree.
That's probably a good idea.
I'm like, hey, look, we got 2 afternoon sits left, Thursday and Friday. Thursday, we still got this southerly wind, which is what the ground blind was set up for. And Friday, we got a northerly wind. Well, we had an encounter with an absolute, 22-inch wide, 10-point stud whitetail over in that other blind. And I was like, hey, if all else fails, we got one more shot over there, and I didn't want to screw it up by hunting it on the wrong wind on Thursday. So we had one more shot at the ground blind. So anyways, we decided not to sit that box blind, and here, sure enough, he walked right to it. Well, out of nowhere, it's interesting because there's a flock of turkeys that kept kind of every night. They'd walk right past us and they'd fly up into this roost tree every night. And they were kind of messing around where this deer was at, this 8-pointer was at. And I think he got annoyed by it. And he kind of kept pushing him off and moving around. And finally, he just decided to walk our way. And not long before that, 3 or 4 deer popped out right next to us. I'm talking like 20 yards away from us in this fence row. And they were kind of feeding, and a few does and a young buck. And I don't know if that's what made him have interest, but anyways, he committed and he came towards us. Well, we were trying to figure out where he's going to walk. Of course, he goes past us. He's basically downwind of us. And we used our scent crusher gear, and we had ozone going, and we sprayed down. We put nose jammer on our boots. Like we did the whole thing, and showers before we went out, everything. Separate showers. Okay. That shower wouldn't have been big enough for both of us in that RV. So anyways, he's coming, he goes downwind, and he's kind of zigzagging back and forth, and he's on the side of the blind. It's all brushed in, and there's only the little triangle window on that side of the muddy ground blind.
Sure. So
Scott opened it up. He's filming out of it, like barely can film out of it. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna have to shoot out of this thing too. So we are, as you see the footage, Twister, which it'll be on deer season 21, another week or so. We are so close to each other in that blind, and I'm like kind of cockeyed trying to see out the window, because for me, he's at the far right side, and I got the scope on the Tradition. So I'm trying to get in position to see out of the scope. I couldn't range find him because the camera's in the way, but he was close enough. I felt like he was about 50 yards or so. And, but he was zigzagging. So at one point I get out the front window, but then he commits and
kind of zigzagging towards you.
Yeah. And so finally he commits and he gets broadside going past us. So I get back out of the little side window and we shoot him. He dies right there in the field. Hit. Yeah, the muzzleloader that thing's on. And everything just worked out.
You're like, oh, it happened.
Yeah.
This worked.
Scott and I were pretty excited, and the landowner was thrilled. And so we made it happen there in Kansas in a span of 4 days. We encountered that deer, got there Monday afternoon at like 4. We went out and hunted. It was like 6:15. We were late, and basically that deer was already out moving on the field. So we saw him Monday, saw him Tuesday, didn't see him Wednesday. We made the move, got aggressive, made the move, but then we saw him Thursday and it worked out, and we killed him. So
it's a good feeling when you do things that end up working out. You're like, I know what I'm doing.
Shocked. I don't know what I'm doing.
Just don't act surprised. You're like, yeah, that's how we do it.
Well, the landowner's like, man, you guys, you really do know what you're doing. I'm like, yeah, that's right.
Well, do what I can.
We walked out of there feeling pretty good about ourselves.
No doubt.
And of course, as we mentioned on the last podcast, the landowner on my lease at home had killed that 174-inch mainframe 8 during the cold front. So I kind of felt the pressure of, if I don't kill something on this trip, this was the worst week ever.
Yeah. And it's a lot of time involved going out there, and then maybe having missed out on hunting here locally.
Yeah. So it all worked out.
All's well that ends well.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Well, we should probably mention that we have 210 crew members in the 100% Wild Facebook crew on Facebook.
We could basically rent a bar out and just have a great night.
We can start a militia.
Well, okay.
If you got some spare time and want something to do. I don't know if they have captains.
I'm the captain.
Adjutants, maybe?
Yeah.
I want some ridiculous title.
All right.
Colonel Drury.
All right. Let's move along.
So we've got some shout outs from, I don't think this is this person's real name. Urfit. There's no vowels in this person's handle. From Apple Podcasts, they gave us a 5-star rating, which we very much appreciate. Said, good stuff, thumbs up, very informative and funny.
With a smiley face. All right, next one's Bucky Downer, YouTube. Matt's on the road. And all he says is 100% wild. So
I think he just really likes it.
All right. Sounds good.
So we'll do our darndest.
All right. Without further ado, let's get into why we're really here today.
Yeah. So what was it? Last month, we were with our friends over at Winchester for the Team Winchester Summit.
That's right.
And part of that team includes Jim Ronquest.
He's the good part of the team.
Then there's the rabble.
Yeah, he's the professional side of it. And then there's us.
So Jim, if folks don't know, They probably do.
But if you don't, you're
Jim is
under
a
a rock.
world championship duck caller.
That's right.
A huge waterfowler. I think Jim, you got the communicator of the year in 2019 from Ducks Unlimited, correct?
Yes.
And
that is correct.
And countless other accolades. He's the producer and co-host of RNTV, and
one of the originators in the industry, man. One of the guys that Mark and Terry and these guys all look up to and speak very fondly of. And Jim, we're just happy to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, man, I'm happy to be here. I'm just like a pig in slop. Y'all asked me to be on your show. I appreciate it.
You know what? We, at that summit, we went out one night. Well, so they had like a dinner function at a brewery. And after the brewery, closed or whatever, we went back to the hotel, and Jim and I sat up and closed that bar down that night. And we just had the best time just telling stories and talking and chit chatting. And we both said, you know what? We need to have each other on each other's podcast, because you do like a Instagram live, Facebook live deal as well, right?
On Monday nights, I try to do every Monday evening at 8, pour a drink and do a Monday night live on Instagram. And it's really fun that, a lot of times I have a guest and you'll get into all kinds of conversations. And then I try to keep up with all the comments when folks, they'll have a question or a comment on something, and it kind of keeps you on your toes because it jumps all around. So yeah, it's fun. It's a fun deal. We need to do that next week or two.
What's your handle on Instagram so people can go over there and follow you? Right out of the gate, I challenged you.
Yeah, no kidding. I think it's at Jim Ronquest. Heck, I got to look it up. I don't know.
We'll verify that, and then we'll link it up in the show notes.
I appreciate it.
I think that's it. When you first jumped on, I said, "Man, I love your background," and then you told us about your storefront there. Give us a little rundown of the store that you guys have there, and where it's at, because I think that is awesome, man.
So we're sitting here in Stuttgart, Arkansas, next to Max Prairie Wings at the RNT call shop, our headquarters, where we do all of our manufacturing. The front up here is our retail space, and I want to come up here to kind of show it off, and it looks better than my office. So I'll give you a little walkthrough here.
Hey.
So this is kind of what we call the tap room. Here's the bar. Miss Saunders back here doing stuff. Say hi, Saunders.
Hello.
We got all the different taps there. All the beers are Arkansas brewed beer. We got a duck call collection here. We got a cooler. It's kind of neat looking here. Different beers you can get. The one that we got our name on. Let me go here and find the Flying Duck. Here we go.
The Flying Duck.
Yeah. So the Flying Duck beer here. Here's a T-shirt that's
nice.
Got the logo on it right there. That's what the beer can looks like.
I need that.
There's some right there. RNT Flying Duck.
Cool.
It's just kind of a cool spot. Just kind of give you a little tour there. We got over here. We got the custom call counter.
It's not a small space.
No.
Got some calls there.
You've made it when you have your own beer and a storefront where you serve beer and you're not even a beer company.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's Mark, Terry, get on the ball here.
Right. We need a brewery. We need a tap room.
That's right.
There you go. There's kind of the basic rundown of our retail space. So thought it'd be cool to hang out up here with y'all.
That is cool, man. I appreciate you taking us on the tour. And if anybody's ever in that area, man, you got to stop by and check it out. So, all right. Before we dive too deep into it, for those that may be under the rock, kind of give us a 30,000 foot view of how you got into the industry. And at that time, probably it really wasn't much of an industry, how you got into this and kind of what, I guess your passions growing up, like, I assume that kind of led you down this path, right?
Yes. So, a 30,000 foot view, bullet points. That's good. So like a lot of folks that y'all know, like yourself and Mark and Terry, I grew up in a hunting family. My parents enjoyed the outdoors. It was a big thing for everybody to get up and go hunting anymore. That was and all the moving around we did, what Dad always ensured we lived out of town, and we had the opportunity to go run bird dogs, deer hunt. I grew up quail hunting, duck hunting, and deer hunt. And then as time moved on, I thought, man, that's working construction, messing around in turkey calling contests, duck calling contests, kind of stuff. That's how I got to know Mark and Terry. In the early days of videoing, was on the Primos Pro staff, and it's back when it was cool. Everybody knew, man, if you had a Panasonic, whatever number,
AG 450, right?
Man,
yeah,
AG 450. That's it. I still got one actually. Man, you were somebody, and I said, that's cool. I like the video side of things because you show people what you get to see, right?
Yeah.
I always thought that was so cool. Anyway, that led to whatever it led into. I kept working at it and wound up working into more on the waterfowl side of the industry than the turkey side, but still doing both. And the rest is history. I wound up here at R&T, producing videos, TV show, work on some call design stuff, and just again, happy to be here. And that's a very short, condensed version of how I wound up where I wound up.
The common denominator, because we had Cuz Strickland on the show. It's been a couple years now, but guys that seem to have longevity in the industry seem to have a strong work ethic, but also a lot of humility and just gratitude for recognizing like, hey, we're fortunate to get to work in this space because not everybody gets to.
For sure. There's that element of it. But there's also the element of changing with the times, and to continue to stay relevant. Even, as you mentioned, your Instagram live that you do on Mondays, like those types of things. And Cuz has his own podcast, and like those aren't, those aren't easy things for as you get older in age to say, you know what, you could easily say, I'm not doing this, but you guys are changing with the times and making sure that you're going where the consumer is and continuing to stay relevant, because that's almost what has to happen anymore to make sure that people know that you're out there. And so that's what I love about what you're doing. And when we were chatting that night at the bar, it was interesting to me to hear kind of the approach that you take and keeping yourself out there and kind of changing the way that you produce and do TV or now social media and all that stuff. So I think that part, the reason why people gravitate towards it, you're doing it, but then you're showcasing your personality, which that's the thing that people love, right?
It's my weak point.
Yeah. Well, that's why we have bad social media following.
True.
Would you agree with that, Jim, or do you have a different take on it?
No, I think you're pretty much spot on, Matt. And the big thing is, like you said, keeping up with the times. I should probably do more. I make one post on Instagram a week, and that's if I'm going to do the Monday Night Live thing or not.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to be more active there. And of course, as producing the show, we're airing our 16th season of RNTV this year.
Nice. But
we're also looking at, okay, what can we do different? What can we do to gain a bigger audience? The waterfowl world's not the deer world by no means. So we're dealing with less amount of people for sure. So trying to stay relevant in that same space, there's a lot of deer hunters that duck hunt, and they're most all duck hunters deer hunt, but there's way more overall deer hunters. So we're trying to get space and get numbers in y'all's world, basically, which is a tougher gig. So it's the same people, but you got to keep it interesting on our side. If that makes any sense. So we're always looking for ways to increase audience. And of course, as y'all know, working with your sponsors, we've got to do the same with ours. They want that return on investment, numbers and eyeballs. So yeah, we try to stay new and different and up with the times.
So now on your show, do you guys also dive into the whitetail side, or is it just predominantly the waterfowl?
Predominantly waterfowl. If we have a good deer encounter during the hunt, a lot of times we'll see some really good deer in river bottoms in the mornings boating in, on a levee or swimming and whatnot. We'll talk about that and show it. But I did do a mule deer hunt, combination mule deer hunt and duck hunt on the show a couple years ago out in Nebraska, and have kicked around doing a combo of duck hunt, deer hunt, because a lot of folks here, our owner for sure, he'll duck hunt in the morning, come to the office for a little while, and he's in the stand in the afternoon. So we should probably showcase more than that. It would probably help us draw a bigger audience.
That's kind of why I wanted to have you on to talk about that, because you were talking about just your passion for whitetail hunting, and of course we knew you had a passion for turkey and waterfowl, but how do you balance that? Because I've been asked to go, in the fall and when the duck season starts, and there's great ground kind of where my lease is, and there's some opportunity there, but I don't know how you can balance it, because those guys like Aaron Bennett and his buddies, they'll get up. I mean, it's like a 2 a.m. get up, drive to their spot, put all the decoys out,
all the equipment.
Yeah. I'm like, how do you guys juggle this, man? I can't do it. I got a 1-track mind, I guess, and too simple.
Well, I'm in the same boat.
All right, bucks it is. I can't do bucks and ducks. So how do you balance that?
Well, you really don't. So if you're really duck hunting, especially on the road, you're really duck hunting. If it's peak of the rut, that's kind of if that's what your focus is, that's the direction you got to go. You may be able to hunt a little bit in the morning, but man, them late nights on the deer stand, coming out after dark and getting your stuff ready and up at 3 o'clock in the morning and go duck hunting, and then a break, the deer hunting in the afternoon. We got to remember this stuff is supposed to be fun and enjoyable. So you really don't. You just got to pick your poison for that period of time. For folks that are pretty serious deer hunters, if you're chasing a big buck during the rut, you'll pick them a few days and you'll go sit on the stand then. Other than that, you just, hey man, I got a free afternoon, I'm gonna go see what happens. That kind of thing.
What's the best way? So say a whitetail hunter is listening to us right now. They've always been interested in waterfowling, but have never done it. What are some of the best ways to get in without too much of an investment?
Right. A good way to get started there is find a reputable outfitter or find a buddy that duck hunts and say, hey man, can I go along and just kind of see what this is all about? And most all duck hunters will take somebody like that along. If you have an interest in hunting anyway, man, a guy said, hey Jimbo, man, I want to go duck hunt. Well, heck, man, we'll find a time and we'll go. And that's a good way to see it. That way you're not buying decoys and boats and everything that goes along with it. Or book a hunt with a reputable guide business, a good outfitter that you can go along with. You'll have a little investment in booking that hunt, but you won't be buying new guns and decoys and all that stuff.
Sure.
That'd be a great way to go learn about it. And it's amazing how everything overlaps. I get a lot of intel from deer hunters that's sitting on stand in the afternoon where ducks might be traveling to. Especially here, we've got some big tracts of public ground that's in the river bottoms. And if a guy's hunting in the bottoms, I'll ask him, hey, man, was there any ducks crossing tonight? Do you know which way they were going? And you'll get a lot of good intel, and vice versa. You'll see deer in places where duck hunting, standing in flooded woods that people wouldn't think them bucks are going to, but they're hanging out in that knee-deep water, getting away from pressure a lot of times. So there is an overlap there, and there's some of the same skill sets. Yeah. Kind of overlap on both of them.
Jim, what kind of, I assume that there are duck leases, much like there are deer hunting leases. What's the kind of average price you would look at? I know like for deer hunting and some really good areas, you're looking at $20 to $30 an acre. What are you looking at for leasing duck hunting ground down there or anywhere?
Right. So around here, whereas most folks, turkey and deer leases deal by the acre. Around here is pretty much by the property or the tract or a field. I know of one farm that's just as an example. I think that place is a 320 or 340. It's got 2 blinds sighting in a woods hole, a little hardwood timber hole, and deer hunting and duck hunting combined on it. I think it's like $65 a year for season. So I'd have to run the math on that. Average field pit in a rice field around here, that's kind of, we're rice country in this part of the world. So there's a lot of people after they get the rice out, there'll be a permanent pit in a levee somewhere. They'll pull the gates back in, put water on it. If they're really decent, they'll go for $7,500 to $10,000 a year. Some more, some less, but that's kind of a ballpark in the middle deal.
So that's kind of, where deer prices are going too. It's kind of the same ballpark. And do you feel like it's the barrier to entry is just cost, or is it that you can go to good public ground places and you don't have to have the fancy equipment and, you know, the latest and greatest, and it's still accessible to people?
Yeah, you know, it's a good question. You know, as we all know, accessibility is getting to be a big thing with everybody, whether you're a duck hunter, a deer hunter, a quail hunter, whatever you do, accessibility is big. And we're fortunate in this country to have all the public ground we have. At times, though, as y'all know, that can be pretty crowded. We are fortunate here in this part of the world to have several big state WMAs. White River Refuge, Cache River Refuge is the largest contiguous block of bottomland hardwoods in the country. You're talking 150, you know, several 100,000 acres of public hunting opportunity, but Mother Nature has to flood that. It's great deer hunting, duck hunting. Used to be some turkeys in there. Anyway, we're fortunate that here there are places that you can take a shotgun and walk in and wade in the woods and go hunting. And all you need is a duck call and a few decoys. But for the most part, the more you get into it, you're going to want a boat, the motor, and more decoys. And if you get into the dog world, and retriever, the whole retriever spectrum is a fun thing too that I'm involved in. So, you know, it's just one thing leads to another. Whereas if you're a deer hunter, a nice bow set up, a crossbow set up, and a rifle, and a couple stands, you can deer hunt a lot for a lot less investment. Here, again, we're fortunate to our places. You can just grab a shotgun and your duck call and walk in and go hunting, but it's not as much as we'd like to have.
That's kind of the overwhelming aspect of duck hunting, is because I have a pretty addictive personality. I find something that I like and I go all in. And so I'm concerned about like, you know, I don't want to start breeding dogs, and I don't want to, you know, have a garage full of, you know, 200 decoys, and like, because I just
no, that's what your wife says.
Right. Yeah, I'd like to stay married if that's possible. And we've already got enough like deer hunting stuff to find storage for.
It's called junk.
Feels like it sometimes. But you know, I'm curious, because I know you do a lot of work in the conservation world. Like, are there areas of overlap between whitetail conservation issues and waterfowl conservation issues?
Yes, there are. You know, pretty much with all critters, you know, that they all live off Mother Nature and the good earth, right? So, waterfowl, naturally in their name, they tend to lean to water. But there's a lot of the food sources that are the same, especially nowadays in big ag areas, you know, hot foods like corn. You know, that's kind of one of the hot topics in the waterfowl world, about there's more corn production in the Midwest than there used to be. And there's more people that floods corn for waterfowl use, but those same areas are holding deer. I can't tell you countless times, even coming out of flooded woods, there was a buck locked down with a doe. There's a little high ridge, and there was 2 deer right there. This was last year. We was coming out peak of the rut, pretty nice buck. We just caught a glimpse of an antler. He's locked down with a doe and a blowdown on just a little small ridge. So some of that same habitat that we use for waterfowl is pertinent to ducks. And then some of that edge ground between where it's wet and where it's dry and heavy cover. How many times have y'all been in the river bottoms up there? That's where you go find a buck, or that's where you find a doe. Or in the springtime when does fawn, and you know that edge cover is important to both waterfowl and deer and turkeys and quail and everything else. So yes, there is an overlap, and if we take good care of the ground and take care of the habitat, manage it properly, we're going to benefit all those species. You know, you may lean into some hinge cut and some hickories and some undesirables in your woods to kind of make for more deer habitat. You may try to increase some thickets for other stuff, but yeah, there's definite overlap. And I'm going to back up a little bit. You was talking about public opportunity, and y'all being in Missouri. Missouri has some pretty cool public areas that they draw for. You can put your name in a hat and you get drawn, and man, they got the blinds. All you got to have is a few decoys and be ready to go. And you can do that pretty reasonable, and they're typically pretty productive too. So I would say to you as a Missouri hand, try to get a drawing at Grand Pass or Duck Creek or one of the other WMAs up there. And that's another good way to go enjoy the waterfowl resource without having a whole lot invested. And it's not like hunting overrun public ground. You've got your place, and there's not somebody right on top of it.
Yep. Yeah, I've done that a few times. Those are some early mornings, especially when you're driving from a distance.
That's what I was saying about Bennett and those guys. I mean, it's like 1, 2 a.m. and
yeah,
it's like, I'm not that ate up.
You got to really want to do it.
That's right. Of course, when it comes to the rut, I get up at 2 a.m. and go, so it's really no different.
There are oddities that, that are just required by every passion.
Yeah.
So you just kind of gut it out and
grin and bear it
and make it happen.
Yeah.
That's all part of it, y'all. There's places here on the public ground that you can't enter until 4:00. So there's guys will be getting in a boat at 2:00 in the morning, running up the river and just hanging out until they can get in, at 4:00. So that happens in everything. No different than whether it's deer, or ducks, or whatever you might be chasing. You just change your sleep patterns, right? If you got to get up at 2, try to be in bed by 7.
A while back, I vaguely remember watching an episode of The Crush with Lee and Tiffany where I feel like they went down to Arkansas for some like big opener and all these boats were on the water and like at a certain time they all got to go to their spots and it was like an armada of boats. It was everybody in the dark. Is that down near you where that takes place?
That happens here on a regular basis during duck season. The boat race, they call it. And there's folks are serious about it. Hot rod motors, get the hell out of my way. I'm coming.
Yeah, I saw that. I was like, all right, I think I drowned out there.
Right. I'd die before I get to my spot.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Jim, we should also mention that. So I don't know how you find the time in the day to make all this happen, but not only are you involved in waterfowl conservation, whitetails, but also wild turkeys. How do you do that? Man,
I just do a little bit of everything and you get by, another good show would be talking about turkeys for tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's a new turkey conservation. We've had our 501c3 now for about 8 months. We're hopefully be able to put the press release out today, signing off on our first 2 or 3 projects.
Wow.
It's pretty exciting, man. Pretty exciting stuff. It's fun to be a part of. I'm the co-chair of it, but the main guy doing all the work right now is a guy y'all may know of from back in the day, Ron Jolly.
Okay. Yeah.
Jolly's he's the one doing all the heavy lifting. And I don't have to do a whole lot other than answer a few emails or offer my opinion. So it makes it easy for me to be a part of him. But yeah, that's a cool thing. We're fixing to I'll just say it here. So through Dr. Will Goolsby at the University of Auburn in Alabama, Auburn University, to say it proper, we're doing a goblin chronology study with some digital saw meters. Along with the dominant gobbler research project. There's some talk, and this gets into down another big rabbit hole. But, Matt, Tim, y'all probably thought forever, like I did, you think if you shoot a dominant gobbler in the springtime, another one's going to immediately take its place. That's kind of the way I've watched it and brought up. Well, now there's some folks saying that may not be like that it may take a while for that lieutenant gobbler to take place of the dominant bird. So I kind of want to know. And there's some talk about if they're fertile or not, if they can truly breed a hen. I don't know. I kind of think they can, but let's find out. And that's part of the research project. And then we're putting, I think, 35 or 50 GPS transmitters on some hens in the springtime to check out what's going on with poult survival, poult production, and where these hens are nesting and where they're going to after the hatch. So a lot of cool stuff to learn here.
I definitely want to have you back on in the spring when it's top of mind for people. And because I started following Turkeys for Tomorrow months ago, I had no idea you were involved in it. And then somehow that night we were chatting, it got brought up, and I was just like, holy cow, that's awesome. We need to have you on and have you talking about it, because they, you should go follow Turkeys for Tomorrow on Instagram and keep up with them. But I don't know. There's so much working against the wild turkey right now that it's nice to see some people that are so passionate about it, get behind it and try to do something to, NWTF, does a great job as well. Obviously they're the big gorilla in the room that's doing a lot of the heavy lifting, but it's great to see organizations like this start to pop up and really boots on the ground and get involved as well. well. So we're happy to help push and promote it in any way we can, and want to definitely have you back on in the spring to talk about it.
Shoot, yeah, we'll save some of the good stuff for springtime, but I appreciate the shout out there. And just for the record, and we'll get more into it in the springtime, we're not out to try to compete with the NWTF. We want to be who we are. And like you say, we're boots on the ground, research oriented turkey hunters and that travel a little bit. And we all have seen the past few years our turkey numbers going down pretty rapidly.
Yeah.
I have heard from several folks, just anecdotally talking to folks around the country, it appears we've had kind of a decent hatch in places this year. I've heard more people talk about seeing poults than I have in the past couple of years.
Yeah, same here. That's good. We need that.
Yeah, it's promising, and I wonder, Jim, like the goblin chronology study, and like how that relates to if a non-dominant bird will breed a hen, like if she'll allow that, how long do you think it'll be? Like how many years of data do you think you're going to need before you start to have a good idea?
Yes, that's a good question. This project's a 5-year study. Okay. There's been gobble counts go on forever. I remember back in the early 80s, people talking about gobble counts, and the chronology of that. So that's all leading into, you use the Missouri model to where Missouri always had the idea that they set their spring turkey season to happen after most of the hens have been bred to kind of maybe catch the second peak of the goblin season. Some states start really early. So there's the argument that say Mississippi and Alabama that start really early, that we're shooting them dominant gobblers before the hens are even breeding. Yeah. And you look at the average hatch dates across the country, hence why the GPS transmitters on the hens will start learning more about when those actual hatch rates are, and if that correlates back to goblin peaks. So kind of in my world, just spending time in the woods, you got that first early goblin peak in mid to late March, depending on the weather. And then, it kind of goes downhill, and then kind of picks back up mid-April, even latitude, not necessarily latitude specific, to where you can be in North Missouri and they're acting the same there, relatively so as they might be in South Missouri, Central Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama. So the idea they're seeing if maybe we can prove to folks that if they start the season later, we cannot harvest as many dominant birds early, and maybe prove that turkeys aren't. How many times y'all heard this? Man, they're gobbled out. They're done. And they may be, but I think it goes on further than what folks realize. And it's probably, I don't know this for fact, this is pure speculation, but I think that the main peak breeding time and hatch time, at least from probably North Missouri south, our part of the world, probably happens within about that same couple weeks period. I think you could argue that you get up in the, New York, Pennsylvania up there, that, it's later up there, but I don't know if it's as big a gap as we've often thought it was. That's just, we're going to find out. Yeah. It'd be interesting to find. I don't want to dig too deep on this, but I'm curious if the gobble, like, are the toms self-reporting how often they're gobbling, or do you have people out listening to them? Well, that's the beauty of the song meters. So in the past, you put people out there, the old gobble counts, you station people everywhere. Well, how many did you hear this morning? Well, how many did you hear? Was you yawning? Was you sipping on coffee? Was you listening to that coyote instead of listening to this turkey gobble or whatever? So the song meters record that digitally, and they've come up with a computer program. As I understand, they can run that audio through something, and it'll pick out some spikes, and then they can count gobbles, and they can start comparing that to where it's, of course, we know right there, break of day is going to be the highest numbers, but we can see those up and down peaks on time of year. Okay. If it's early spring, mid spring, late spring, and, maybe prove out those different peaks. Interesting. I think it will be interesting. I kind of like the idea of a gobbler walking to a polling station and self-reporting on how many times he gobbled that day. Hit a button. Right. It was about 10. Also, the dominant gobbler study too is going to be interesting. They're going to try to, I don't know exactly how they're doing it, but it's on public and private ground too. So that way we've got kind of a fair control, right? So, public ground turkeys get more pressured. They're going to shut up quicker than well manicured private ground will. Sure. But on the dominant bird deal, they're going to try to do some sperm counts to see if there is a difference between a dominant bird and a subdominant bird. If you watch 2 or 3 turkeys strutting in the springtime and you've got a good set and there's 3 coming in, there's one that's really white and the other 2 are red. And that white turkey is always the dominant turkey. One's got the more white, it waddles. So you just wonder if there is a difference there. I don't know. To me, if you look at it mother nature wise, how many times have you seen a jake try to top a hen decoy? Mm-hmm. It seemed to me if they couldn't breed just through natural selection, evolution, why would they even try it? Why would you waste that energy? So it'll be pretty interesting to see what comes out of this study and if all that does happen or doesn't happen. May change turkey hunting.
Sure.
Who knows?
Yeah. We'll have to stay tuned on that one.
I like that.
I don't know.
Change turkey.
I don't really want to change it. Let me rephrase that. Well, that was a bad phrase.
No, but you're right. Like
timing of seasons.
Based on what you guys find out or help to find out, it may change some timing of seasons. And that's because it's real fun to turkey hunt when they're acting right. You always hear that when they're acting right, but that may be part of the problem for us, and we're the only ones that are going to fix our own issues. So this kind of research is going to help it.
Well, it will. And, we really have to. Of course, if we get 2 or 3 good years of good hatches, maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe that's what we're seeing. Those of us who got to see the rise, I remember my dad talking about turkey hunting in the early days of Missouri season and then seeing how it rose to what it was in the up through the 90s and early 2000s and then see what it is now. Is that habitat based? Is it weather based? Is it over harvest issues? Just exactly what are those problems? So now we can maybe find out and know which way we need to go. As hunters, as American hunters, we've always paid our own way and we can fix our own problems. We just got to put our finger on what those problems are.
What I hope is that we don't have a few good years of production and people start to, because it's a very localized perspective that most people have. Like, I heard, I saw some birds.
I saw none.
Heard some good gobbling. It was a great season. I hope that we aren't so parochial in our thinking that if we locally have some good seasons that we can forget about all these kind of larger systemic issues that turkeys have, that we stay focused on the bigger, more long-term picture.
By and large, when you look at social media in the spring, you really get a sense of it's down everywhere. I mean, by and large, big picture, when you kind of, check in on different posts or what people are saying, it's been pretty negative over the last couple of years. So I don't see that just magically changing with a good hatch or two, because ultimately the numbers, like Jim's saying, if you knew what it was in the 90s and in the early 2000s and what it is now, it's just not the same.
Yeah.
Now, of course, there's areas where we saw 50 in Kansas on this one piece. They don't hunt turkeys. They couldn't care less about turkeys.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes a difference, I'm sure.
And one of our listeners just sent us a note saying, "Hey, I'm covered up in turkeys up here in Minnesota. Like, I don't know what you guys are talking about."
Yeah.
So I mean, you have to have a bigger picture, bigger and more long-term perspective on the issues.
For not wanting to dive into this, we really dove into it.
We got pretty deep there pretty quick.
That's what we're known for.
We're kind of fighting the same thing this year in the waterfowl world. So it's been a dry year on the prairies and the duck breeding areas, northern tier states and the Canadian prairies. And of course, those areas have to dry out at times so they can rebuild. But there probably wasn't much duck production this past year. And because of COVID, if you're into duck hunting, you'll understand what the BPOP and the May pond counts are. Every year in May, a cooperative deal between the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Canadian Wildlife Service, and different state agencies do a major deal. They fly all these transects and they count how many ponds are on the landscape and they count how many breeding pairs of different duck species they see. And that's all plugged into an adaptive harvest management report to know how many ducks we got, what our breeding population is, and what our breeding habitat is like, those ponds, those temporary wetlands on the prairie. So this past year was extremely dry, 1980s dry, along with having 2 years because of COVID, they couldn't do the BPOP or the May pond count. So a lot of concern this year with a liberal duck season in front of us, which is a 60-day season in Mississippi and Central Flyway or Mississippi and Atlantic, trying to decide if that's the right decision or not. So hopefully we've all made the right decision. We got good numbers in the background to back it up. And then this next spring, we'll be able to go back and do a May pond count and BPOP and see where we're at. And then hope we have some good weather to put some water back on those areas for this next spring. So it's all back to your question about, is there overlap in that habitat management? Yes, for all of them, it all comes down to weather and habitat. Think of, talking back to turkeys, how many years in a row have we had torrential rains Memorial Day weekend? About that prime hatch date for turkeys. What was it? 2 or 3 years ago, South Missouri, North Arkansas had 20 some inches of rain right after turkey season. So, that wiped out a lot of nests. And same way with ducks. If you get a bunch of moisture on the ground, you fill all your ponds up, all that cover gets flooded. It's really good for them young birds, have nesting cover, places for them to go after the hatch. So that's all important, and it all works together.
I wish people who are against hunting could listen to these kind of conversations to hear just how much science and thought goes into protecting the resource, protecting these animals, making sure they have what they need. I think some people might be swayed and have at least a different perspective on hunting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perspective is everything, Tim. And to that point, if we don't take care of the resource, whether you're a passionate hunter that hunts every day, all you can, whether you just hunt a few weekends a year, or if you're on our side of it, if it makes your living along with being your passion, if we don't take care of that resource, both the critters and the land they live on, it won't be there for us down the road. So how can we sustain our way of life if we don't take care of the resource first? Which I think if we take care of the resource first, then we can continue to do what we do.
100%.
Well said.
I'm going to help out our buddy Lil Curtis from Illinois on the question of the day.
Absolutely. So the question of the day is proudly brought to you by HHA Sports, the leader in single pin sights. And I will say, I do love that single pin from HHA.
Good. I'm glad.
It's the only part I don't care for it is all based on my crappy shooting at 60 yards.
When you get it set up.
When you have to sight it in. But other than that, it's great.
Spot, yeah.
That's my weak spot, but that's a personal problem.
Yeah.
All right. So question of the day. Let's hear it.
Hey, Matt. Hey, Tim.
Hey.
Kurt Geyer from Working Class Bow Hunter. I'm really doing nothing but a wellness check right now to make sure you guys are okay over there on the podcast. I saw on DeerCast, so there were some people worried that your guys' podcast was going away and we were replacing you. I know we're Mark's favorite. It's weird times, right? It's weird times. We're glad to be here. New kids on the block, gets kind of awkward, but just doing a wellness check. Wish you guys the best. In all seriousness, we're looking forward to collabing and keep up the good work.
I had no idea that that's what you had in here. So, Jim, you got caught up in a turf war. So we just partnered up with the guys over at Working Class Bow Hunter, and they got the best podcast out there, and they're doing some exclusive content for DeerCast. And Tim and I's podcast, the 100% Wild podcast, is
the little engine that
has been pushed aside, and it's called the Not Your Favorite Outdoor Podcast because Working Class is your favorite. So Kurt is trolling us, the guy over there at the Working Class. He's trolling us right now, and he left a question of the day for us, and Tim called him Lil Curtis.
I'm assuming that's what he goes by.
He got caught up in a turf war.
Well, maybe I can help y'all out with that. Maybe we can pull some of our crew over there with y'all a little bit.
That's what I'm talking about. That's right. Watch out, Kurt.
We'll take it. If you want semi-informed opinions on whitetail hunting, bring them in.
and not much else.
I got it, man. Not a problem.
And body noises.
All right. So let's dig into that wildlife word.
The wildlife word is brought to you by Hunter Specialties, makers of the brand new DoD line of deer calls. And Scott, can you toss us a couple of those calls? Man, we just he's literally going to throw them at us. Check it out.
All right. So this is something that Mark and Tad Brown, who's worked with Mark, and I know Jim knows well.
Yes.
Then the guys over at HS have been developing together a new line of deer calls. So there's one other in this call called the Rack Jacket, kind of antler, system to easily go out there in the fall. It fits in your backpack and it doesn't make a lot of noise until you are ready for it to make a lot of noise.
Yep.
And Tim's going to model it.
Probably not.
All right.
So this tasty so this is a multiple choice question. This tasty woodland treat has 110 calories, 6 grams of protein, 24 grams of fat, and 41 grams of carbs. Is it A, persimmon, B, a pawpaw, C, an acorn, or D, a zagnut bar?
Jim, we always let our guests go first, so you're up.
Oh, what were my options? Get a persimmon, a pawpaw, and a
acorn or a zagnut
what kind
bar?
Well, all right. Any difference, white oak or red oak acorns, or does it matter?
Doesn't matter.
What about weight or size?
Doesn't
So
matter.
if you start all them carbs and calories, it would depend on the size of it. But
you're talking to a guy here that's had a transformation of his own over the last few years. I mean, so he's dialed in. He knows his nutrition.
One of the autocorrects that come up when you Google Jim Ronquest is Jim Ronquest weight loss.
Yeah.
That's funny. But I'm on we're not getting so my gut wants me to say acorns because they're full of fat and carbs.
Is it acorns or acorns?
Depends on where you're from. For me, it's
is
acorns.
it soda or is it pop?
Yeah, that's right. It's acorns. That's good duck food. I'm on a first answer. I'm gonna follow my gut and say acorn.
Okay.
But it may be the zagnut bar. The zagnut bar is probably the difference.
It's hard to beat a zagnut.
I'm gonna go with a persimmon.
Okay. Well, the actual answer is acorn.
You look out, Jim. Woo.
That's 110 calories for a single egg. I mean, that's power packed.
That's a lot.
And
that goes into a whole nother deal. Forest health issue with our bottomland hardwoods. Red oak acorns are jet fuel for mallard ducks and deer, for that matter. Back to your habitat overlap deal.
Yeah.
So that's I kind of study that pretty big around here. So I kind of had an inkling that acorns was going to be the word.
Well, and it's interesting because when I think of acorns, when I think of nuts in general, I think fat. But it's almost got twice as many carbs in it than it does fat.
That's what she said.
Thank you.
Well, and they're good carbs too. I mean, that's why you see ducks and all the critters. Think of a big white oak tree on a good acorn year where you got your tree stand hung at. Same kind of deal.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about some of my hunts here recently, and I've got a really neat little food plot tucked back in the woods, and the deer are just coming there to touch the mineral site right now. They're like a highway to the big oak tree on the neighbor's property.
Perfect.
So they love them some acorns.
Should have planted an oak tree, Tim.
Y'all
just need 40 years to go back in time, get the DeLorean out, and
What's
go
the
back and
problem?
make it happen.
There you go. That's
Cool.
good.
Cool. Well, Jim, thanks so much for hopping on, man. I don't know if we've ever covered this many species in one particular episode.
We have not. We've never had someone so versed in all the species like we have Jim.
It's true.
So-
Yeah. People should pay us for listening to this show.
Or pay Jim at least.
Yeah.
Hey,
Venmo.
boys, we can come out with a partnership here. I promise you, we can
That's
work
right.
that out.
All I'm interested in is coming down there and having a beer at your bar. That's it.
Take the show on the road.
That's right. Road show.
Man, hey, y'all come down, set up. I'll buy you a beer, teach you how to blow a duck call, and bring y'all into the duck
gosh.
hunting world.
I don't know that you could.
That would be interesting.
I beg to differ. I bet you couldn't teach us to blow a duck call.
Someone fell on a harmonica.
I'll try. How's that? I'll take
All
that.
right. I like it.
Cool.
Well, we appreciate it, man. Thank you so much and good luck this season. We look forward to checking
bet.
back in with you in the spring and diving into turkeys for tomorrow.
I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
All right.
We should probably let folks know there's still a chance to win that Tracker Off-Road unit in DeerCast. Go to the giveaway page in DeerCast. Make sure you sign up for that. You can only sign up once. If you sign up for it twice, it'll shut you down. Don't do it.
So sign up once. It's in DeerCast. It's a free giveaway, and it's a Tracker 800. So this thing is bad to the bone. I've been using one at the lease there. It's awesome. So
Pretty sweet.
Absolutely.
Yep. So I think that's it.
All right.
Thanks for watching, everybody.
Until next time. Peace out.
The results are in.
DeerCast said it was supposed to be a great night.
Well, here you go.
DeerCast said great.
It doesn't exist anywhere else but in DeerCast.
Hunters love DeerCast's exclusive deer movement forecast. Get ahead of your game with DeerCast.
We're adding new videos every week, so make sure to click that subscribe button and check out all of our amazing content. This episode of DoD TV was brought to you by Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's.